There was a single mother who had 3 daughters. The youngest daughter was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor. The doctors broke the bad news to her mother. They told the poor woman that her daughter had only 3 months to live. The family were devastated by the horrible news. The mother decided to have a family photo taken while her youngest daughter was still alive. That way, they would always have something to remember her by. They hired a professional photographer to come and take the photo. The family posed with the youngest daughter sitting in the middle of the picture, and her mother and oldest sisters arranged around her. Afterwards, they had it framed and hung over the fireplace in the living room. 3 months later, the youngest daughter died in hospital. Her mother and her 2 sisters were at her bedside when she passed away. The funeral took place 2 days later. After the funeral, the mother was sitting in the living room when she happened to glance up at the family photo over the fireplace. She was horrified to discover that her daughter's face in the photo was shifting and changing. It looked distended and deformed, almost demonic. They brought the family photo to the professional photographer and complained. He said he had no explanation for why the photo would suddenly change, making the dead child appear so grotesque. The mother was at her wit's end. She took the family photo to a psychic and begged the psychic to tell her what was wrong. The psychic took one look at the family photo and recoiled in horror. "I'm sorry to have to tell you this," said the psychic. "Unfortunately, your daughter has fallen into hell." There were two 15-year-old girls named Alice and Sarah who had been best friends since early childhood. They lived in the same neighborhood, attended the same school, and went to the same classes. In short, they were inseparable. However, they were very different characters. When Alice was cheerful and outgoing, Sarah was very shy and quiet. One day, Sarah and Alice were talking about their friendship. "Do you think we'll be best friends forever?" asked Alice. "I think so," replied Sarah. "Why wouldn't we?" "I don't know," said Alice. "Sometimes when people get older, they grow apart." "I have an idea," said Sarah. "Let's take a blood oath." "A what?" asked Alice, surprised. "A blood oath," said Sarah. "Look, we both have to swear that we'll be best friends forever. If we ever lose touch, we both swear that we will do everything we can to make sure we will be together forever." "That's nonsense, Sarah," said Alice. "We won't lose touch. We'll always be together." But Sarah continued to insist, and with a mixture of amazement and amusement, Alice finally agreed to the proposal. Sarah found 2 needles and handed one to Alice. The girls took a piece of paper and wrote "Best Friends Forever" on the top, and then signed their names at the bottom. They lit a candle and heated the tips of the 2 needles in the flame. Taking their needles, both girls pricked their index fingers, and each smeared a drop of blood next to their signature. Their blood oath was now sealed. As the years passed, the girls grew up and left school. Alice went away to college in another city, while Sarah stayed in their hometown and got a job in a local store. Both of them had boyfriends and fell in love. The girls still kept in touch by phone, calling each other at least once a week. When Alice had completed her law degree, she got a good job and decided that it was time to get married. The couple bought a house and settled down. A few years later, they had a beautiful baby boy. Alice was so busy with her family that she rarely found time to call Sarah. It wasn't long before the phone calls stopped completely and the friends lost touch with each other. Although Alice would sometimes still think about her best friend from her youth, she never took the trouble to pick up the phone and call her. In the end, life had led the two women down different paths, and they had not seen each other since they left school. One night, Alice had a horrible nightmare. She was driving along an endless highway when suddenly a truck in front of her began to swerve into her lane. The truck skidded and then collided with her car. She woke up suddenly, soaked in sweat. Just as she was trying to calm herself down, she heard her front doorbell ringing. She glanced at the clock by her bedside and realized it was after 3 a.m. Her husband was fast asleep on the other side of the bed. At that moment, the doorbell rang again, insistently. Wondering who could be coming to visit at that time of night, Alice got up, threw on her nightgown, and went downstairs. When she opened the front door, she was shocked to see a woman standing on the porch. The woman was terribly pale, extremely haggard, and had a huge bleeding wound on her forehead. Although she had changed a lot, Alice recognized her immediately. It was her old friend Sarah. "Oh my God, Sarah, what happened?" she cried. Sarah just stared at her. "Come in, out of the rain," said Alice. "Are you hurt?" Sarah didn't move from where she was. "What's wrong, Sarah?" pleaded Alice. "Long time no see, Alice," hissed Sarah. "I've come to fulfill my promise. I've come to tell you I died." Alice was speechless. Sarah held up her hand and pointed at Alice with her index finger. Her finger was dripping blood. "Life has separated us," Sarah continued, "but we will be together in death. I'll be waiting." Alice then fainted and collapsed on the ground. The next morning, when Alice woke up, she found that she was laying in bed next to her husband. She rubbed her eyes and wondered if the events of last night had all been just a bad dream. At breakfast, she turned on the television, and what she saw chilled her to the bone. The local newscaster was saying that the night before, right around 3 a.m., there had been a fatal traffic accident. A truck had collided with a car on the highway. The driver of the car had been killed on impact. The driver of the car was a woman named Sarah. From that moment on, Alice's life became a living hell. She barely ate a thing. She forgot to pick up her child from school, and when she went to work, she couldn't concentrate on anything. Every night, she had the same terrible dream. She would awake to the sound of the front door bell ringing. She would open the door and find Sarah standing there, her bloody index finger pointing straight at Alice. Each time, Sarah would say the same thing: "I'll be waiting." Each morning, Alice awoke in a cold sweat. She looked down at her bed sheets, and they would be streaked with blood. She felt an excruciating pain in her finger, and when she looked, her finger was covered in blood. Her husband did not understand what was happening. He took his wife to see a doctor and a psychiatrist, but neither of them could find any explanation. Alice's condition only grew worse, and in her nightmares she began seeing Sarah standing at her bedside, pointing with her bleeding finger. One night, the husband was awakened by a dreadful noise. It was the sound of breaking glass. He ran out to the bathroom and discovered that the window was broken. Peering outside, he saw Alice lying on the sidewalk, her limbs askew. The horrified man rushed downstairs and out the front door. There was a pool of blood around his wife's head. Beside her on the pavement, someone had written in her blood, "Friends forever." A husband and wife were home one evening when they heard a knock on the door. When they went to answer it, there was a strange gentleman standing on the doorstep. He was dressed in an expensive black suit, and he was holding a large briefcase. "I wonder if I might have a few moments of your time," he said. Assuming he was a traveling salesman, they invited him in. The gentleman placed his briefcase down on the kitchen table and took something out. It was a box with a single red button on the top. He handed the box to the husband and the wife. "Today is your lucky day," he said in a calm tone. "You have an opportunity to become rich beyond your wildest imagination. If you press this button, you will receive $1 million in cash. There's just one catch. Someone you don't know will die." Saying that, the gentleman opened up his briefcase and showed them the stacks of money inside. The gentleman told them that he would return the next day to collect the box. After he left, the husband and wife discussed the box. They argued for hours on hours and hours. Eventually, they decided to press the button. Nothing happened. The next day, the gentleman came back. He took the box, and in exchange, he gave them the $1 million. As he was about to leave, the husband asked, "Did someone really die?" "Of course," the gentleman replied. "It happened last night, in a distant place. Someone you don't know, they died." The husband felt guilty. His conscience was eating at him. "One more question," he said. "Yep, what do you want to know?" said the gentleman. "Well, what are you going to do with the box now?" The gentleman smiled and said, "I'm going to give it to someone who doesn't know you."